All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive with us. You know we always like to go deep. And today we're diving into a question that's been debated for decades. Is political theory dead?
Well, it's a question that really shook things up. Especially back in the mid-20th century, you've had some major thinkers basically saying that the field had lost its way.
Yeah, and one of those thinkers was David Easton. He basically argued that political theory had become too obsessed with the past,
Well,
stuck in this rut of just recounting history.
yeah, he called it historicism, and he saw it as a real problem. Because if political theory can't offer insights into the challenges of the present, then what good is it really?
Okay, so imagine this. You're a diplomat trying to navigate the Cold War. Would you rather have like a super detailed history of political thought from ancient Greece to the Enlightenment,
Right.
or some kind of framework for understanding the ideological clash between superpowers?
I mean, that's a no-brainer. Easton was basically saying that political theory needed to be more than just a history lesson. It needed to provide tools for analyzing power, conflict, all the messy stuff. That makes up the real world of politics.
So how did he make his case? Or did he just like throw out some opinions?
Well, he did more than that. He actually took aim at three big names in the field: Dunning, McIlwain, and Sabine. These were major figures. But Easton argued they were all kind of guilty of this historicism.
Okay, so let's break it down. Starting with Dunning. What was his approach to political theory?
Dunning was all about the historical evolution of ideas. He was like an archaeologist, carefully uncovering layers of thought through different periods.
So super thorough. But Easton had a problem with that.
Well, Easton felt that Dunning's approach was kind of incomplete. Like, he gave us this amazing map of political thought, but he forgot to include the compass.
So we know where ideas came from, but we don't know where they're going, or even which direction we should be heading in.
Exactly. For Easton, it wasn't enough to just trace the history of ideas. You also need to figure out which ideas are worth pursuing and how they can help us create a better future.
And that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're thinking about international relations. It's not enough to know what Machiavelli thought about power. You need to grapple with how power operates in the 21st century.
Right. We need to connect the past to the present and use those insights to shape the future.
Okay, so that's Dunning. What about McIlwain? How did he approach political theory?
McIlwain was a bit different. He agreed that ideas have a history, but he also emphasized their potential to influence political action, even if that influence was indirect.
So he's more focused on the practical implications of ideas.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
He was interested in how people throughout history defined what a good political life looked like and how those ideas shaped the way they lived and governed themselves.
So he's looking at ideas as living forces, not just abstract concepts.
Exactly.
But Easton still had some issues with McIlwain's approach, right?
Well, Easton argued that even though McIlwain was interested in the good life, he ultimately fell into the trap of moral relativism.
Moral relativism.
Right.
Okay, for those who aren't familiar with that term.
Basically, it's the idea that all values are subjective, relative to a particular culture or context.
So there's no universal right or wrong, just different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a very simplified way of putting it. But you get the gist.
And Easton wasn't a fan of this idea.
Not when it came to political theory. He felt that if all values are relative, then how can we even talk about good or bad political systems?
Right. It's like saying, well, this country believes in democracy, that country believes in authoritarian rule. Who are we to judge?
Exactly. That's the dilemma Easton was highlighting. He believed that political theory needed a stronger foundation, a set of principles that could guide us in evaluating political actions and systems, even in a world of diverse cultures and beliefs.
Okay, so we've got Dunning, the historical archaeologist, and McIlwain, the action-oriented relativist. That brings us to our third player, George Sabine.
Sabine. He was a giant in the field. His book, A History of Political Theory, was like the go-to text for generations of students. He tried to find a kind of middle ground between Dunning and McIlwain.
So did he manage to thread that needle? Did Easton approve?
Well, Sabine acknowledged that ideas have a history, but he also emphasized the importance of understanding the moral judgments embedded in those ideas.
So he's saying, we can't just look at political thought in a vacuum. We need to understand the values and beliefs that shape those ideas.
Right. He argued that those values continue to influence political life, even today.
Okay, so he's connecting the past to the present. But is that enough for Easton?
Well, Easton felt that while Sabine recognized the importance of moral judgments, he ultimately shied away from making any strong moral claims himself.
So even though Sabine was trying to find that middle ground, Easton still saw him as part of the problem.
You could say that. Easton saw this as a symptom of a broader trend, this reluctance to engage in robust ethical debate. He worried that political theory was becoming too descriptive, too hesitant to offer any real guidance on how we should live and govern ourselves.
So we got these three thinkers, each with their own take on political theory. And Easton is basically saying, hold on a second, you're all missing the point.
He felt that political theory needed to be more than just a history of ideas.
It needed to be relevant. It needed to help us grapple with the very real challenges of the modern world.
From international conflict to social justice, Easton wanted political theory to have teeth, to make a real difference.
And that's what we're going to explore next. We'll unpack Easton's own vision for a revitalized political theory and why his ideas are still so relevant for anyone studying IR. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about David Easton's critique of political theory and his concern that it had become a little too focused on just recounting the past. Now I want to dive into a concept that Easton grappled with, and it's this idea of moral relativism.
Yeah, moral relativism, it's a tricky one, but it's super relevant to how we understand politics, especially on the global stage.
Absolutely. And Easton was really worried that this trend towards moral relativism was actually preventing political theory from being truly insightful and relevant.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar with this term, can you break down what moral relativism actually means?
Sure. In a nutshell, moral relativism is the idea that there are no universal moral principles. What's considered right or wrong depend entirely on the culture or the context.
So basically, there's no objective standard for judging what's good or bad.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Okay, I see where Easton might have a problem with this. I mean, if everything is relative, then how can we make any judgments about political systems or policies, or even the actions of states on the world stage?
Exactly. That was Easton's big concern. He felt that if we accept this idea, that all values are relative, then we lose the ability to make meaningful critiques of power or injustice.
Right. Because if everything is relative, then who are we to say that one country's human rights record is better or worse than another's?
That's the danger Easton was warning against. He believed that political theory needed a stronger foundation, some kind of framework that would allow us to make ethical judgments, even in a world where values and beliefs can be so different.
So how do we apply this idea of moral relativism to the real world of international relations?
Well, think about it this way. When you're analyzing a conflict, let's say the conflict in Syria, you can't just look at the events in isolation. You need to understand the historical context, the cultural values, the religious beliefs, all of these factors that shape the perspectives of the actors involved.
Right. You need to see things from their point of view.
But, and this is a big but, if we take moral relativism to its extreme, then we're basically saying that we can't judge any actor's actions, no matter how horrific those actions might be.
So we can't condemn human rights abuses or genocide because, well, that's just their culture.
Exactly. And Easton was very clear that this was not the path he wanted political theory to go down. He felt that it needed to be more than just a descriptive exercise. It needed to have a moral compass.
Okay, so I'm seeing how this all ties back to Easton's critique of those three thinkers we talked about earlier.
Dunn, McGillen, Sabine. Easton saw them all as being, in their own ways, too caught up in description and not engaged enough in the messy business of making moral judgments.
So it's not just about understanding what is, it's also about grappling with what should be.
Exactly.
Now, I know Easton didn't just criticize moral relativism. He also offered some explanations for why he thought political theory had gone astray. What were some of those reasons?
Well, he identified three main factors. First, he argued that political theorists, perhaps unconsciously, had started to reflect the dominant values of their own societies.
So instead of challenging those values, they were more focused on justifying them.
Right. And this led to a kind of intellectual stagnation, a lack of critical thinking and debate.
Okay, that's the first factor. What about the second?
The second reason, as we've already touched on, is this embrace of moral relativism.
Right. The idea that we can't judge other cultures or other political systems.
Exactly. And this made political theorists hesitant to make any strong moral claims. They were afraid of being accused of ethnocentrism or cultural imperialism.
So they played it safe.
In a way, yes.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So conforming to societal values and the rise of moral relativism, those are two big factors. What's the third reason Easton gives? for political theory losing its way?
His third point is a little more subtle. He argued that in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there was this period of theory, of relative moral consensus, at least within Western societies.
So basically,
Yeah.
everyone was kind of on the same page.
More or less, yeah.
And how did that contribute
Yeah.
to the decline of political theory?
Well, Easton argued that this consensus, ironically, led to a decline in robust ethical debate.
So if everyone agrees,
Yeah.
then there's no need to argue.
Right. And this created a kind of blind spot within political theory.
So when the world was shaken up
Mm.
by things like world wars
Mm.
and totalitarian regimes,
Right.
political theory wasn't really equipped to deal with those challenges.
Exactly. It was too stuck in that old way of thinking.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yes.
Easton is basically saying that political theory
Mm.
needs to be more than just a history of ideas. It needs to be engaged with the moral and ethical challenges
Mm.
of our time. And that's where we're going next. We'll explore what Easton proposed as a solution and how his vision for a revitalized political theory can help us make sense of the complex world we live in. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So we've been talking about David Easton's critique of political theory and all the problems he saw with the field. But now it's time to get to the good stuff. What did Easton actually propose as a solution?
Well, Easton wasn't just a critic. He genuinely believed that political theory had the potential to be a powerful force for understanding and shaping the world.
So he wasn't saying that we should just abandon the whole field altogether.
No, not at all. He just felt that we needed a major course correction, a shift in focus, and a renewed commitment to relevance.
So what did that look like?
Well, one of his key ideas was this concept of developing conceptual formworks.
Okay, conceptual frameworks. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Basically, Easton was arguing that instead of just describing political phenomena, we need to develop tools for analyzing them.
So it's not just about what happened. It's about why it happened.
Exactly. And how those events fit into a broader pattern of political behavior.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this would be helpful, especially if you're trying to make sense of complex issues like international conflict.
Absolutely. A strong conceptual framework can help you see the connections between different events and understand the underlying forces that are driving them.
So it's like you're developing a mental map.
A map that helps you navigate the complexities of the political world.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But Easton didn't just want political theory to be more analytical. He also wanted it to be more engaged with ethical questions, right?
Absolutely. He felt that political theory had a responsibility to grapple with questions of justice, equality, and the kind of world we want to live in.
So it's not just about understanding power. It's also about using that understanding to create a more just and humane society.
Exactly. For Easton, political theory was ultimately about making the world a better place.
Okay, so we've talked about Easton's critique and his vision for a revitalized political theory. But I'm curious, how have his ideas actually influenced the field?
Well, Easton's work was definitely controversial, but it also had a profound impact on the way political theory is studied and taught today.
So he shook things up.
He definitely did. And while not everyone agreed with him, his work forced people to rethink the purpose and the potential of political theory.
And I think that's a good thing because we need a political theory that's relevant, that's engaged, and that can help us address the challenges of our time.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored David Easton's critique of political theory, his concerns about moral relativism, and his vision for a revitalized field. But most importantly, I think we've shown why these ideas are still so relevant for anyone studying international relations and for anyone who wants to make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. Political theory is more than just an academic exercise. It's a tool for understanding power, for challenging injustice, and for creating a more just and equitable future.
So if you're listening to this and you're feeling inspired, go out there and engage with these ideas. Read the classics, challenge your own assumptions, and think critically about the world around you.
And if you're enjoying these deep dives, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review.
We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic that will help you make sense of the complex world we live in. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.